Whitewater rafting is a thrilling activity enjoyed by millions of people around the world, in environments ranging from the mild to the extreme. But sadly, like any recreational pursuit, it can also be a gateway to the most horrible of fates by the slimmest of chances. Tablesaw is a Class 3 whitewater rapid on the Ocoee River in the U.S. state of Tennessee. Class 3 rapids are of intermediate difficulty, since the international scale of river difficulty maxes out at Class 6. While Class 3 rapids are far from the worst kind of rapids in the world, they still require significant training, ability, and dexterity to navigate safely, and those who end up in the water from their boat may face long periods of swim before being able to safely exit the water. The best navigators of such waters are not likely to be a group of inexperienced teenagers, and accidents are always possible. As a matter of fact, this particular rapid has caused many deaths and injuries over the years. On July 21st, 2019, a group of teenagers was navigating a section of Tablesaw when their raft upended and threw them into the churning waters. The water was also elevated and the flow stronger than usual due to recent rainfall. One of the rafters, a teenage girl named Yariennys Hernandez, lost her life jacket in the ensuing chaos, placing her in imminent danger of drowning. Sadly, the attempted rescue did not put an end to the nightmarish experience. When rescuers and fellow rafters alike tried to grab her and pull her back onto the raft, there was a vertical drop-off in the rapids, making the rescue many times more difficult. And with her life jacket gone, there was no leverage to pull her back into the boat. Her leg also got caught in a loose rope as she was pulled underwater by the current, effectively suspending her upside down, underwater, in a whitewater rapid. Upon the recovery of her unconscious body, she was taken to shore for first aid, but there was no surface flat enough to perform proper CPR, and valuable life-saving minutes would have been wasted searching for another location. Those who were with her made their best efforts under trying circumstances. When emergency personnel arrived on the scene, she was taken to the nearest hospital in that fateful gulf between life and death, with some of her organs already starting to fail from the effects of the ordeal. She stayed in that condition for 4 days after the incident, when she was finally taken off of life support, dying at the age of only 15. The evening of Monday, October 24th, 2022, was like any other on the New York City subway. People and trains came and went in a hectic atmosphere of expectable pandemonium. And it wasn't until the evening that anything noticeably out of the ordinary occurred. At Columbus Circle Station, a 20-year-old opera performer was running for the doors of a train departing from downtown. He made it to the train, but in a way that he nor anybody else present could ever have imagined. The doors shut before he could make it inside, but some of his clothes were trapped in the automatic doors as the train departed from the platform. Dumbstruck passengers and passers-by watched one of the most horrific tragedies imaginable unfold in a matter of seconds. The worst nightmare of a subway passenger or operator. When the victim was pulled onto the tracks, he wasn't just pulled behind the train as it traveled, which would have been horrifying and excruciating enough. Being suspended from the subway doors by his clothes meant that he was being dragged alongside the train, not against the edge of the subway shaft, but rather on a parallel subway track, whose trains ran in the opposite direction. It was never revealed what distance he was dragged by the train that he was caught on, but his agony came to a sudden and brutal end when an oncoming train struck his helpless figure. His death was one of 88 on the subways of New York City in 2022. Every year, 15,000 people are killed or hurt by the terrifying, hidden, and impersonal weapons known as landmines. Their victims generally tend to be civilians, people who do not understand the conflict, who have not signed up with one side or another, and who simply want to live their lives in peace. Amidst the horror of landmine injuries, there are some small mitigations to their terrifying effects. The vast majority of the time, landmines do not cause injury to the other leg or higher than the knee, and most of the time, children are spared the horror of landmine injuries. By sheer coincidence, they mainly impact adults. In the aftermath of the 1994 Rwandan genocide, when nearly 1 million Rwandan Tutsis were massacred by the Hutu majority government, a family of 3 people, a father and his 2 daughters, were returning to their homes after the government's overthrow. Amidst the relief of their homecoming and lacking any military experience whatsoever, the 3 family members likely did not take any notice of a small metallic click somewhere beneath their feet. An anti-personnel fragmentation landmine promptly detonated, catching all 3 members of the family in its radius of carnage. Immediately, everyone present suffered some degree of frightening injury. Since landmines are capable of hurting their targets 200 meters away, there was little possibility of escaping unscathed. The father's chest was peppered with shrapnel, one of the worst such places to be wounded in such a manner. Fortunately, his wounds were quickly mended when he sought medical attention for himself and his daughters, and no long-term damage was done to his body. However, the shockwave of the blast crushed one daughter's legs, broke one of her arms, and beyond that, filled her limbs with tiny pieces of shrapnel. Being much closer to the site of the explosion than her father was, the damage to her body was much worse. When the family reached a medical center, desperately injured, the first daughter's legs had to be amputated, one of an extremely unfortunate few to suffer multiple injuries from a landmine. The second daughter seemed at first to be the least severely injured, but this turned out not to be the case. One of the tiny pieces of metallic shrapnel thrown from the blast at extreme velocity shot straight into her brain, inflicting a traumatic brain injury from which she soon perished. In one day, an entire family was injured, disfigured, traumatized, and ruthlessly torn apart by an absurd, tiny contraption of plastic and metal. Around the world, tens of millions of these inexpensive weapons are sitting, still and quiet, in past and present battlefields. There, they will wait for decades, and perhaps centuries, for a hapless victim to help them fulfill their ghastly purpose.